Mine was People of Color and Justice, and I did it over the topic of the Red Summer and how it relates to people of color and justice. The Red Summer was a pattern of white violence towards black people that started in 1919 throughout the United States. The Red Summer affected at least 26 cities across the U.S. World War I had recently ended and the Great Migration started, which was a big immigration of African Americans from the South to the North and Midwest, in hopes of escaping the poverty and discrimination of the Jim Crow laws. In the summer of 1919, about 500,000 African Americans had resettled in the North. In a lot of cases, the Northern whites, some of them immigrants themselves, did not welcome them. When the war ended, many of the white men who went to fight in the war were upset about their jobs being taken, especially by African Americans. Many incidents weren't started by white supremacists, they were started by normal white people. Many of the incidents were made far worse because local, state, and federal officials hesitated to act or just turned a blind eye. Some of the local police even joined in some cases. A 4-day riot in Washington, D.C. began on July 19th when a rumor about a black man caused mobs of white people to attack local black neighborhoods and assault random African Americans on the street. The local police were overwhelmed with everything, so the black community came together to fight against the mobs, arming themselves with bats, gloves, pistols, and knives. Soon the black group attacked the white ones just as they did them. President Wilson ordered troops to secure the streets. After Washington, there was a massive race riot in Chicago because a black teenager crossed an invisible line between where white people and black people could go on the beach while swimming, and white people stoned him until he drowned. The riots in the south and west side of Chicago went downtown and lasted days. Eventually, the state militia was deployed to restore order in the city. The records are all different, but the death count was listed as 38 fatalities, 23 black, 15 white, 537 people injured, and over 1,000 black families homeless from the burning and destruction of African American neighborhoods. The Black Wall Street is one of the biggest known events of the Red Summer and most devastating. This took place in Tulsa, Oklahoma's North Greenwood Avenue. It was named the N-word Wall Street by W.E.B. Du Bois, later being renamed the Black Wall Street. There were many prospering businesses there owned by wealthy black people. This community had barbershops, salons, clothing stores, jewelry stores, taverns, pool halls, movie houses, grocery stores, offices for doctors and lawyers, a hospital, and a school, among many other businesses. Laws prevented black people from shopping anywhere else but these stores. So, like, all of their money and all that went towards this community. Jim Crow laws in Tulsa is said to be one of the worst places. Greenwood was one of the wealthiest black communities in the nation at the time. The actual incident began the morning of May 30th, 1921. A young man named Dick Rowland, who shined shoes for a living, rode the elevator of the Tulsa Drexel building to use one of the only segregated restrooms downtown. It is said, after people put it together, that Rowland bumped into the elevator operator, who is a white woman, and she screamed. But there were rumors of sexual assault at the time. Rowland ran, and he was arrested the next day, which led to an armed confrontation outside the courthouse between a white crowd and black veterans that had just returned home from World War I, who were hoping to defend Rowland from getting lynched. Things became very heated quickly, and shots were fired, and the outnumbered black men left and went to the Greenwood district, and the white mob followed. From that morning through June 1st, the community was torn to the ground. Many members of the white mob went from house to house, looting, then torching the buildings. The residents in these homes trying to escape would sometimes be shot down in the street. Hundreds of people were flying air. Hundreds of people, white Hundreds of white people were deputized with guns by the city to shoot black people. As the fires were burning, people were flying airplanes over that would drop bombs of kerosene or some types of fire-spreading chemicals to make everything worse. By noon of June 1st, the governor declared martial law. When it was over, the city took the remaining black people to makeshift concentration camps. After nearly 1,200 buildings were burned to the ground, after the massacre, many people of the Greenwood community went to file claims for their losses, but none of it was ever fully repaid, which would amount to tens of millions of dollars today. City officials tried to help build Greenwood again, but it was never the same. Now there are about 26 buildings, and where the buildings used to be, there's a plaque in remembrance. A freeway also cuts right through the middle of the community, and most of it is gentrified. This robbed them of generational wealth for their families, and there could have been so much more opportunity later on. Though today, descendants and few survivors of the massacre are filing lawsuits and demanding the city of Tulsa repair the damage. After the massacre, it was all covered up for a very, very long time, and not one person was prosecuted or held responsible for the actions that were involved in the massacre. Many of the people that died that day were buried in mass graves. 100 years later, they are digging them up and doing DNA tests on the bodies to find the descendants so they can decide what they would like to do with the bodies. These events are only a few of the events that took place in the Red Summer, and some of them not even the worst. And there are many other historical events that took place like back then that are very big in people of color injustice. People of color have been experiencing injustice for many years. It even still goes on today. Many people don't know much about the Red Summer or about it at all, or many other historical events. I think it is one of the first steps to putting an end to people of color injustice in America, because the mass amounts of hatred and racism towards these people and how it's barely talked about, and even when it is talked about, it is only briefly talked about.